Please.
Good morning. So I'm Linda Hanson. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Indiana. And Barb Tully, who is here also, is on the state board. Cindy Lawrence and Cook is also on the state board. And Kate Munson is our intern for the summer. And we've been particularly grateful to have her learning along with us, but doing a tremendous amount. So helping to get the word out, helping to register voters, helping us to do the promotion for the Citizens Handbook. So without further ado, a little bit about the league. Um, why is this not moving? There. Okay. Who are we? Some of you may know about us. We are a nonpartisan group that has been around for over a century. The league was formed on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1920, just a few months before the 19th Amendment was ratified in August that year. The Indiana State League was born the same year. We were formed even again before the 19th Amendment was ratified. So we've been around doing this work for over a century. We have 700 chapters, all 50 states. So we are broadly distributed and members, all genders are welcome. It says League of Women Voters because that's our origin. And I want to say one of the things that the suffragists who were anticipating having the vote thought about before that momentous occasion, they said, voters have to know what they are going to vote on. So not just registering voters and trying to get out the vote, but also educating voters about our government, about the candidates, about what the issues are. All of that has been part of our DNA since the founding of the League. So why do we do our outreach work? Well, it didn't all just fall into place in 1920. It takes continuous work. Every new generation coming up, getting the vote, has to understand why it's important. And our record in Indiana is not good. In the 2022 general election, Indiana placed 50th out of 51. Only West Virginia placed behind us in voter turnout. There is the Civic Health Index, and you can see the image of the cover of the latest report there that's put out, has been the last 5 years, 6 years. So it's tracking our progress in trying to reach voters and getting them out to vote, getting them involved in our civic life. We are not doing very well. So we need a lot of help, and part of that is understanding how our government functions, how to get things done, and participating. Voters say, well, my vote's not going to count. Well, it does. It clearly will. Um, so one of the things that we decided to do was, and this is, it's been over a year since we figured out exactly what we wanted to do, but it takes a little bit of time to get this done. We applied for a grant from the National League and put together a plan for a Citizens Handbook. This is focused on civic education. It is nonpartisan. It's designed so that it will pull into a relatively concise way all of the functions of our government and essentially identify where people need to go to get something done and why it's important, not just to vote for the top of the ticket, but to vote locally, to vote for those people who are actually going to be making decisions that affect our lives. So uh, we got the grant. We engaged a couple of people who know this material well to put this together, and they got it done. They ran it by their 13-year-old daughter so that it is accessible for everyone who needs to be reminded of their civic responsibilities. And we are trying to get it out. So if we think about what the role of the everyday citizen is, you know, we have to be educated. We have to understand what the issues are and who's running. Herbert Hoover, think about this going back in time, said self-government can succeed only through an instructed electorate. That's us. We need to be instructed. We need to know what's going on. We can't just assume that, even if we vote, that it'll all be taken care of the days following that before the next election. We need to be instructed and we need to know what's going on regularly for those we elect. So that brings us to our libraries. As Walter Cronkite said, whatever the cost of our libraries, the price is cheap compared to that of an ignorant nation. Libraries are crucially important to our functioning as a democracy. And unless there are some questions at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Barb.
Thank you, Linda. We talk about decline in civics a lot in this country, and it's been a lamentable fact for years and years. It's not just school-aged people. It's also people that are beyond traditional education ages, high school, college. It's people that are just out in the world living their lives. The National Assessment Governing Board produced a report in May of last year that said 8th grade scores. Well, okay, so we know that. Pew said Americans are following news less, so that kind of feeds into a lack of understanding about civics and kind of the function of government and what is going on in the news. That Pew report was from October of last year. Education Week in November of last year said, hey, it's not just US citizens or US students. It's students throughout the world. So it's not just us. We're not just heaping on America. It seems to be kind of a worldwide trend. And we have opinions about why that probably is happening. And we'll get to that in a little bit. And then in February of this year, the US Chamber of Commerce said, hey, there's this alarming lack of civic literacy amongst Americans. And I think that for this group in particular, because librarians are highly read people, everybody would probably be, if I could see you, you would be nodding your heads going, yes, we know this, we know this. So we have to do something about it. Next slide, Linda.
Yeah, well,
there we go. So that decline in civics leads to an erosion of public trust in public institutions. Well, we can't have a civil society if people don't trust our institutions. Like what are we going to descend into? Anarchy? No one's suggesting that. We have to trust our public institutions. It's happened over lots and lots of years, so there's not a single point in time where we go, well, this was the tipping point and we started to go downhill after that. There were lots of things that happened over the years. And I get the unenviable task of going through the things that we think caused this to happen. The League, meanwhile, has devoted its work, the 104 years that we've been in existence, to voter engagement and civic engagement. So we want people to be involved. We're dedicated to doing this. We talk to groups all the time. We register voters all the time. And we do it in a nonpartisan way. And we kind of, I feel like we're a little bit preaching to the choir because librarians are so well informed, and we're probably on the same soapbox saying, get to know stuff, get to know, and people may or may not listen to us. So let's go through some of the reasons why we think there's been a decline in civics. So the rise and regulation of the internet, if there's any tech people on here, I'm sure you're probably going to say you missed a whole bunch of steps, Barb, about the way the internet was developed. But you know what? That's too much information. What we want to get across is that the internet started in the 60s as a way for the government to researchers to be able to communicate with each other. And then I think when the Cold War happened, the military got into it. And then, protocols were developed over the years. And finally, in 1989, we got the World Wide Web. Yoo-hoo. Internet's going to be this great open marketplace of ideas and people communicating with each other. And if we all remember when PCs started to come into offices and we all got email eventually. And I was working at a bank at the time and it all seemed like it was just woohoo. What are we doing here? This is wild. Um, but it has given rise to no universal standards. There are certainly technology standards, obviously, or we wouldn't have the World Wide Web, but there's no universal standards for privacy, intellectual property. We've seen a rise in harassment online, and cybercrime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So pluses and minuses with all the technology. And I've always said when we get technology, sometimes we get ahead of ourselves in terms of where we need to go with regulating it appropriately for public use. And certainly the internet might fall into that bucket. Next slide, Linda.
Oh, man. There.
So artificial intelligence, all the buzzword, right? Last year, this year, artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence. Da, 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 da. It's the great new thing. Well, the first generation of it happened in the 1950s. It was developed and developed and developed by data scientists, mathematicians, and others until it's become its current iteration, which don't even ask me to explain what its current iteration is. I'm not sure I entirely understand. But the idea of artificial intelligence is for efficiency and reducing human error and providing innovation. And we all know that there are limitations of that. I mean, you reduce human error and you do automation, and you may have spurred job losses. There are deep fakes, which we are not necessarily as humans qualified to spot. There's some bias from bad data. There's social and economic inequality, et cetera. So we haven't, the regulation of artificial intelligence has been talked about for a while, but is only kind of gaining steam now, but not gaining steam to the extent that you see great movements for progress that are going to promote kind of fairness and transparency with artificial intelligence. So we think that there's some potential downside to artificial intelligence. Broadcast media. So this is television and radio. First started out as radio with the Federal Radio Commission, and then which became the FCC after that because of broadcast television broadcasting. And so when this was new, when we think about 80 to 100 years ago, you know, there were people that were concerned with fairness. And so there was an attempt to put policies and doctrines around what was broadcast and, oh, can we have this be balanced? And can we have this be fair to both sides or however many sides there might be to an issue, particularly when it came to political speech. In that light, there were three doctrines, Mayflower, Fairness, and Zapple, and the Zapple only fell in 2014, but those mostly fell out of favor over time and were rescinded because people got concerned about free speech, First Amendment rights. So politicians kind of said, well, wait a minute, hold on. And now we know what we have in broadcast media, which is kind of anything goes. And people can kind of say anything they want to. Next slide, Linda. We also have the decline of traditional media, so newspapers and et cetera. You know, Yale said, okay, decline of traditional media feeds polarization. Reuters, people are turning to TikTok, scarily enough, for news as opposed to traditional media. Pew again, declining traditional news media in the US. I mean, we know that newspapers and publications are going away at an alarming rate. And then even the US Census Bureau said, well, the internet's crushing traditional media. Well, we know that. I mean, I switched my newspaper subscriptions alone just to digital, but I still get them. I do kind of waver on the edge of getting rid of one or two of them, but I keep them because I feel like I should. But people read newspapers less. They just read news sources, good traditional news sources less. Then we get to social media. Oy vey. You know, there are some rewards to social media, you know, connectivity, connecting with family members far away. I've got family members that are quite far away, and so I get to see their kids who I will not see very often. You can build relationships in a social group or a community that you're involved in. You can find causes or things that you care about and can relate to others with and share ideas, etc. So all good, yay, great. You can make job connections, etc., etc. But we all know the risks, and they are many, many fold. And we're raising a generation, several generations of people who don't necessarily have the interpersonal skills anymore, the critical thinking to be able to assess what some of the stuff is that they're reading. There's a lot of fake stuff online. People don't know how to interpret that. You throw artificial intelligence into this, and it just gets to be kind of a big mishmash of like what's real and what's not real. Next slide, Linda. So then cellular technology, which gets layered on top of all of this because basically we're walking around with a PC in our pockets. Sure, it's convenient, and we can virtually text anyone anywhere in the world or communicate in some form with anyone anywhere that also has similar technology, a PC in their pocket. But while delivering immediacy and giving clickbait, is the content actually good? And I would contend that it actually reduces critical thinking because any of us, I'm not just pointing fingers at the younger generation, I think any of us go, oh, that's a news story, wherever we happen to see it. And have we vetted it to really see that it's a good source of information? And I would say maybe not. And when you layer that on young people who maybe haven't developed full critical thinking skills yet, it just kind of creates a little bit of a bleak picture. Next slide, Linda. So then we get to libraries. No pressure, you guys. You guys are so important to our democracy, and I'm so excited to talk to all of you today. So the American Library Association, you all know this, was formed in 1876, enhance learning and ensure access to information for all. And you probably also have to report numbers of people that are coming in, or maybe people that are borrowing books or borrowing other things from the library. It's one of the most visited public service institutions, which we should all be proud of. And anyone can go to a library. It doesn't matter your social status. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, or what political party you might belong to, or what your beliefs are. Anybody can go into the library and get access to information. They are called palaces of the people, and rightfully so. And it's very important for us to safeguard that you all are on the front lines of frankly, guarding our democracy. Next slide, Linda. And so there was a hopeful sign out of the legislature this past March when Senate Bill 211 was signed into law by the governor. So this was frankly, for Indiana, kind of a rare woohoo, great Indiana. It was passed in the 2024 legislative session, and it establishes an excellence in civic engagement designation for high school students. Now, the curriculum and exactly what it is that they have to do needs to be worked out, but it's intended to be applied to students that are going to be graduating in 2029. But they have to do things like show an understanding of civil society, of constitutional government, and the democratic process. They have to possibly show volunteer hours with a civic project, et cetera. So it's just the bill that's been signed into law, and our Department of Education is going to figure out how to get that out to the schools and have it be a structured program. But really, really good step by the Indiana legislature, and we should all applaud them for taking that step to get our kids, high school kids, involved in a civic engagement and civic understanding. So back to you, Linda.
So what you didn't hear me say was, are there any questions for Barb?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, good. So let me talk a little bit about the handbook, a little more about the handbook. The QR code we're making readily available. We have, and you may order some of these, but we have the rack cards and a small table tent with the QR code on it. And we're trying to make it easy for people to get to this online. where all the links work. But in the meantime, we also have the hard copy, and there are some of these out. We're making sure that we can get some of them available. If we get more money to print more, we will make more of them available. But at this point, the online version is going to be the most useful one, and we're trying to make sure that you all can get access to it. And let's see how I do this. All right. So the authors, Dr. Darren Wheeler, who's in political science at Ball State University, and his wife, Stacy, who is at the Bowen Center for Public Affairs at Ball State, works with them at times. She also runs the teacher store in Muncie, so that's not what it's called anymore. But anyway, certainly supporting education all the way around. And they were selected to prepare this because, well, I've heard Darren speak before, and he always makes complex things accessible to people. Not that our government is so complex, but it is. So he does make it accessible, and that's something that we want everybody to understand. So the first goal of this handbook is to promote a more informed, engaged, and empowered citizenry to help strengthen our democracy and promote greater equity and justice in society in general and among underprivileged communities in particular. So we want this system of governance to be accessible to everyone. Table of contents, if you're in the online version, actually links to each of these sections, and you can see why it's important. It's focused on what the citizen can do, each of us. How to know the basics, and then participating in politics at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. And then your rights to vote, and there's more. But it is nonpartisan, absolutely straightforward. And for those who took their civics courses and thought, okay, this is required, but I'm not engaging with this. So they passed their tests and they got out and they got their credit. This is really a way to give them access to that information that they put in the back of their brains, we hope at least, to recall it so that they can actually begin to participate. So understanding that our government is a representative democracy, how that works. So that does mean that the people we elect have to represent us, and we want them to be accountable. We want citizens to know what an elected official in the county council is supposed to be doing. And we elect him not just because we recognize his name, but because he has a position on something. So we want people to understand that they need to get involved to know who their elected officials are and the people that they're going to elect when they go to the polls. So they work on our behalf. They are not just working in a vacuum, and the decisions they make affect all of us. So if we start with the Constitution and the constitutional amendments, it actually spells out what they are so that people can look at them and not just hear, okay, 19th Amendment, the right to vote. Well, it actually took more than the 19th in order to expand voting rights to include everyone. 26th Amendment to women and 18-year-olds respectively. 17th, and I can't see that, just a minute. 17th provides that citizens can directly select their U.S. senators. That was not the case. So we have changed things from the initial processes. People need to understand that. If we want more direct election, people need to be able to get engaged, know who to talk to, say, oh, we need to be able to do this. 18-year-olds petitioned. People said, oh yeah, well, we're sending them to war. We need to add them, make them have that right to vote for the people who are making decisions for them. So enabling people to understand how the Constitution controls what we do and spells out the three branches of our government is important, but it's done in a succinct way so that they don't have to read through all of it and they should understand how it functions. So the three branches of government spelled out. So we've got the executive branch, the president, and over the civil service, the legislative branch, Congress, a House and a Senate elected differently. So representation is somewhat different in those two houses. People need to understand that. Why do we have a senator or two senators from Indiana? Why do we have different representatives, each of us in a district? That representative is going to have more control over the access for citizens to decisions made in the House. And those are budget decisions. So what's the difference between those two? How do they function in that legislative branch? And then the judicial branch. So we've got the Supreme Court, but we've also got federal courts. People need to know what those distinctions are. How are the federal courts spread out in the country? It's not just in DC. We have federal courts in Indiana. So we need to know what kinds of cases they can hear. Where do we go? Why is something in this court and not in that one? This is a way for us to participate at the state level then too. We've got Articles of Confederation comparable to the Constitution in different states, in each state. So we do have mechanisms for direct democracy in multiple states. Indiana does not happen to have the possibility for referendums, initiatives, or recalls. Pretty much in Indiana, everything goes through our state legislature, which makes it even more important that we know who we are electing and keep track of what those representatives in our own state legislature are doing in the Senate and in the House. We also have, obviously, executive, legislative, and judicial branches in Indiana. We mirror the federal government organization, and those are spelled out with access. And in the handbook, if you're on the digital version, you actually have the links to get to each of these. I should have mentioned earlier ones have links as well, but you have a link that takes you to the Indiana State Legislature. If you're going to follow bills or follow a particular senator or representative, you can easily get to what they are doing in the legislature. Providing that access and a bit more understanding of what they're doing, we hope, should make citizens more likely to be participating in the elections and then working to help keep our elected officials accountable. At the local government level, we have not quite the same structure, but we have a county government, we have city government, we have townships and town governments in Indiana. And certainly those of you who are working with in the libraries know you're going to be funded by one or the other. You may be a county, you may have a county library, or you may have one in Muncie. Our public libraries only work in Muncie, so they don't go out to the county. People can petition to get a card, a membership, but there are different rules for the libraries. And I don't pretend to know all of them and why some of them go some places and some don't. But we know that multiple branches are going to respond to the local government issues and then get help from the state, which is good. So county government has jurisdiction over things over the county. If your library is working with people to do programs at the library, sometimes you're getting things focused on the city. Occasionally you're getting things focused on the county government, and they do have different functions, and sometimes they overlap, especially with redevelopment commissions. So that's something that the handbook can help people sort through. Yes, I'm gonna leave that one. So one of the basic things that we want to make sure that people understand is that after they look through all of the issues about how our government is structured, what's there, is that they have a right to have a say in our government. We all do. And that's actually a responsibility as well. So 2 types of elections, primary and general. The differences are spelled out in the handbook. But the interesting thing about this is if you watch what's happened in elections nationally, all the way, I mean, every state, the primary elections have almost become the elections. If you've got a state that has predominantly one party, they have managed to, and it doesn't matter which party, they've managed to set up districts that pretty much allow for non-competitive elections. So if you are in Illinois, you probably want to vote in the Democratic primary. If you're in Indiana, you could vote in the Republican primary because that's where the real competition is going to take place. People need to understand what happens in the different elections, primary elections, sort through the parties, candidates, and select one to go to the general election. Obviously, we have other parties as well who don't hold primaries, but the general election then has rules for people in the libertarian or other independents to get on the ballot. And we may end up with, in my congressional district 5, we had 11 candidates in the primary for Congress. We are down to a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent, and maybe a libertarian, although I'm not sure you made the qualifications. So from 11 down to 4 for the general election. But people need to be able to understand how those are going to work. And in Indiana, we do not have closed primaries. So you may take either a Republican or a Democratic ballot in the primary, and you are, you may be listed then as Republican or Democrat, but you are not registered as one or the other, and that's not going to prevent you from voting in the other primary in the future. So we have at least a little bit of flexibility at that level. Then the general election, you need to go out and vote as well. But those voting rights, we need to make sure that we know what changes every year in election rules and keep that up to date. The league tries to keep track of all of those rules for voting, what makes you eligible, and we get them out on our website, help to publicize them, publicize the Secretary of State's website information so that voters are going to be informed. What we don't include those in, the rules in our handbook because they change depending on the legislature. So we give them the source. So one of the things that we've done also in the handbook is to try and give citizens ways to participate, to make an impact. And we've got obviously becoming informed is one of them, but getting involved, being an advocate, joining interest groups, attending public meetings, become an observer, stream them if you don't want to go and sit in the meeting. But then that gives you a chance to interact with them, see what is actually going on, and you can let your representative, whether it's city councilman, county commissioner, let them know what you think. You can contact those public officials. You can serve on a jury, and certainly you can vote and work the polls. So we're trying to provide a way for citizens to become involved, to understand the system, and to become involved. Have any questions before we go into some of this?
Yes. Why are primary ballot types where you select Republican or Democrat, why aren't they confidential? She said, I'm always
Well,
curious. Yeah.
the actual votes are confidential, but they record whether you are Republican or a Democrat. This has been something that the parties have chosen because they are essentially running their own primaries, but they put them together for for the benefit of the public. So you can choose one or the other. But it is that data that enables the parties to determine what the proportion of voters is in the country. I mean, in the state. And so they make their estimates about for redistricting based on that information on the what they claim is the Republicans or Democrats in Indiana. So that, yes, I believe it should be confidential. I think we should have one primary and all the candidates are on it and the top ones win and go to the general. But I doubt that's going to make it in Indiana because the parties have worked out this system where they can have more control over who gets onto that final ballot. That help, Kara?
Yes. Then we have a couple comments. Let's see. I wish we didn't have to pick a side for the primary. Sometimes only one side is running, and I want to help choose who it is, even if they are not my party. After all, they will be one of my leaders.
Right.
And then the next comment is I hate having to choose between one or the other. I don't vote a straight ticket any other time, so I shouldn't have to for the primaries. And some people are agreeing with that.
Yes. Well, it's possible that we could gather enough people's comments like that to take it to the legislature and say, look, this is, if we really want to expand the opportunity for people to vote, the access to the polls and access to choice, we really need to have an open primary. And if we get enough people saying this, we might be able to get them at least to listen. It will not make it through right away, but it's something I think to work on because for a true democracy, people need to be able to have a voice. And but we also need to realize that we can take either ballot in the primary. It is not, we're not confined to one or the other. So, and that's not commonly understood. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, let's see. It's confusing when you say we need to have an open primary because we do have an open primary.
Well, not all candidates who could potentially be on the general election ballot are there. Republicans and Democrats have their own primaries, but libertarians would not be listed, independents would not be listed. If all the candidates were on one ballot, that would be an open primary. And then the top four, or say six, whatever, depending if it's the county commissioners, you probably need at least four on there. So the top vote getters would be on the final ballot in the fall. And it could be two Democrats or two Republicans or a Libertarian and a Republican. It would depend upon how many votes they get in that initial primary.
So I saw a comment there where someone said it would be a good thing to work towards. And the league agrees. And so we beat our chest about this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, what Linda's suggesting is something akin to ranked choice voting.
Right.
And the league supports ranked choice voting, especially for local elections, because it does seem a little bit silly. We hear a lot of voters say things like, I don't want to have to choose just a ballot, a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot.
Yeah.
But again, as Linda said, the party in power are the ones that are going to control that. And, Illinois has the opposite problem of Indiana. They're a Democratic supermajority, and Indiana is a Republican supermajority. And people in power generally don't like to see those things change. And so that really is the crux of it. And if we're, as citizens, as normal, everyday citizens, going to have an effect on our legislators, they need to hear from many of us. And so that is the point that Linda is getting across. Like, lots of us have to be speaking up.
Right. Yeah, it's and it's not easy. If you look at the data from about the last 25 years in Indiana, for any election, like for senators, for governor, the split is 43 to 47% Democrat, 53 to 57% Republican. Our legislature does not look like that, nor does our representation in Congress. And that's because the party in power has set the districts so that they pretty much will guarantee that the party in power will stay in power. Yes, gerrymandering. So it would be nice if we could actually get that kind of representation, because that would reflect Indiana a lot better. We're much more purple than our legislature would reveal.
I mean, we have to help people understand that compromise and collaboration are not dirty words in politics. That's the way politics gets done, right? The people reach across the aisle, they have to work together. When in Illinois, you only have the Democrats creating legislation and creating committee hearings, or making agendas for committee hearings about what bills get heard. Or in Indiana, the same thing. The Republicans are doing it. You get a skewed vision of what it is getting worked on, and then they get pulled in one direction or another, and they don't have to reach across the aisle. And that is not what the League believes in. The League
Right.
believes that people have to work together to compromise.
There is a comment. Indiana is a very red state, and people who vote blue feel like their vote doesn't matter. Give me some good phrasing to use to convince these folks otherwise. I have ideas, but just wonder if you have a good way to say it.
Well, the thing that we try to stress is that your vote locally is going to have a significant effect, because those things affect you in your life every day. And if you can help people understand that they need to pay attention to the positions of their local candidates, get them to do forums, get them to answer the questions on Vote 411, then they will have a chance to actually make decisions based on positions, based on what they will support. And it's telling when you start looking at that issue about voting locally. Those are the ones that have the most impact on you. That doesn't mean don't vote all the way up and down the line, but start locally, and you can begin to see that your vote does matter. We also know about, one of my local city council members won by 7 votes. It was 9, and they did a recount, and it got down to 7, but she still won. 7 votes. Okay. I mean, we can cite other ones nationally. We can pull out things where 1 or 2 votes made the difference, and that's true. Or 1% made the difference on larger scales. But it is the people who vote who make the difference. And if you don't vote, you have no say at all in what's there. And, that's a sad state. So,
Linda, I'm going to let you finish your presentation. I want to make sure you get through everything that you wanted to share.
okay.
Because we do have some more questions and comments, but we can do that at the end if we have time.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Because we want you to know that these materials are available. You can request the, well, we've got copies of the rack cards that are on your right, and you can have a number of those so they can be available for people to take with them. It has a QR code for the handbook. It also has a QR code to get to Vote 411, which is the league's, and it's national, but it's the league's website that has all the voting information that you need. You can go on there and register, which it actually takes you to our state registration page. But to register, to check your registration, it tells you where you vote. In other words, what your precinct is, where you, and the actual location where you vote. It tells you who's on your ballot. And ideally, if the candidates respond to the questions that the league has given them, they upload their own answers, and you can compare the candidates for city council, the ones you have to vote for, because it'll only show you your candidates. What does this one think about this zoning issue? What does this person think? And the comparison can enable you to make informed decisions. So that's Vote 411, and the handbook tells you how how our government works. We also have these table tents. They're 5x7. Have one out on the counter. They'll be easy to see. It also has the QR code for the handbook. And we also have graphics. If you're willing to use some of these graphics for your social media, for your newsletters, we have a PDF that we can send you that has all of these graphics in it. So you can see ways to do it, and the QR code, obviously. So we can make those available as well. We will send those to Kara. She could send them out to you all. Okay. Then, okay, more I already told you about. Vote 411. This shows up with the QR code on that rack card. And when you get to Vote 411, I mean, it will take you to in.gov so that you can, indianavoters.in.gov. It'll allow you to do your registration, verify it, and apply for an absentee ballot. But you start with Vote 411, it'll automatically take you there when you need to get there. Okay. So we really need the libraries. We need all the individuals that you can reach to be a pebble in your pond. And we really appreciate your efforts to help us publicize this handbook. I'm going to show you, if you can, I would like to show you our actual website, because you can go there and download it. You can refer our website to others so they can see it. And now, do I have to reshare this? Can you see my website? Nope.
You've only shared your PowerPoint, Linda, so
Yep.
you'd have to say.
Yep. All right. I'm going to share again. Okay. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously there's a lot there you could explore if you'd like, but on the home page you will see our Citizens Handbook. And if you want to explore the Indiana Civic Health Index, which we mentioned earlier, access to that is here as well. But from here, go directly to the handbook. And you may download it, you may look at it online. If you want to follow any of these, participating in local government, from the table of contents, it'll take you there. And you can go to, yeah, okay, 92 counties in the state of Indiana. This should show, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so it'll take you to any of these links. Okay. So when we get to, okay, if you want to tell Congress about something, okay, you can tell Congress. And it'll take you to, you find your own representative and you can tell them what you want. Okay. So, whoops, wait a minute. I'm going to do the other. So once we get to the table of contents, 10 ways to participate. With issues, if you want to find something out and you think that there isn't enough information out there about something that happened, you can double check the Freedom of Information Act, and then Access to Public Records Act enables you to make a request for information that you think isn't being presented. We've done some of that. It's called the Sunshine Law. Most of you in the libraries, I'm sure, know about that. Okay. There is the open meetings law as part of that. And if people want to do that, we try to give them some suggestions, and locally you would be able to do that to direct them to your local government website, and ideally help to push them to stream their meetings or make their minutes accessible. So there is also a move in Indianapolis. I think Barb's participating in that for documenting a meeting. And we have something in the league called the Observer Corps, which local leagues, at least before COVID, were doing more actively. They're trying to get back to doing it more, but they will go to meetings, report on them back to league members. But the documenting program out of Indianapolis is putting these up publicly. So we think, that's also a good thing, finding a way to do that. Do you want to talk anything about that, Barb?
So Indie Documenters is through the Mirror Indie folks, and people get trained to be and get paid to either do a meeting virtually or in person. It's not a lot of money, but it's something. And they are trained to take notes, and then they have a certain amount of time after the meeting to upload those notes to the website, and anyone can have access to the notes, i.e. journalists who write stories about local meetings, that there's too many meetings of this committee, that committee, school board, transportation department, police review board, like a bazillion things. And there just aren't, because of the decline in traditional media, there just aren't journalists to cover that. So if citizens can be trained to do that stuff, you can't express an opinion at those meetings. You can ask clarifying questions if the people running the meeting take questions. But the point is to get that information out in the public, and then public can read it, but journalists can read it too, and then perhaps create a story out of it. It's called Indie Documenters.
Yep. So one of the most important things about this, obviously, is getting people involved to vote, to work the polls. There are links, registering, check online if you're registered, early voting options, check your ballot, vote 411. But for students, this Hoosier Hall Pass program is really useful. And I think it's something that the libraries, you might want to point out to some of the young people. So the Hoosier Hall Pass program, they can work the polls. And I'm going to take you on one link more to vote 411. So if you enter your own address, you will get your own information. Okay. It's on here.
A couple more questions, Linda, that we might want to try to.
Okay. Question.
Oh, just so you know, we're getting close to the end. And so let me just hop in here. You can stay as long as you want, as long as they're willing to stay. I'll stay on. I just want to say I will be sending out the order form for the physical promotional materials in the follow-up email. I'll send you a certificate. If I can, I might even be able to share the PowerPoint. So I will be sending out lots of information. And if there are questions that don't get answered, I will make sure that I ask them to respond. Okay, back to you.
Are there more questions?
Yes. Hang on a
We can take
second.
a couple more. Yeah.
Yeah. One would probably be of interest to all. I know this handbook has been professionally printed in limited quantity. Oh, shoot, I lost it. Hang on. Are we allowed to print them in-house and place them out to take?
Certainly.
Okay, certainly. Perfect.
I will tell you that the format is set for this lovely shape, and it makes it a little hard to print it perfectly.
Well, everyone's saying thank you, and I want to say thank you. If we can partner any other ways, I would like to do it. I just think that getting the information out to libraries is a very important avenue for getting, everything out to lots of people. All right, everybody's saying thank you, thank you, thank you.
I was going to say, if the libraries have a website, they could put a screenshot of it up there. I can actually send you something else that could go up on the website as a link.
That's perfect too. Great. Yeah, everybody's saying they love their League of Women Voter people in their area. Great information, terrific. Yeah, I've just learned so much. I just think this is going to be really, really great that we can share this stuff out.
This has been wonderful for us too. We really appreciate this partnership because the libraries are really, in many ways, our last bastion for making sure democracy works. So
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. You know what? It's so funny that this came up because I just got an email this morning that they're trying to cut 15% of library budgets at the federal level.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got an email, contact your representatives. So I definitely will be doing that after I get home. We're not supposed to do anything like that at work, but I will when I get home. Yeah. But it's just, just shows how important it is because library budgets are not that big anyway. And, to cut 15%, I don't know what that would do. It would be, noticeable for sure. So definitely don't want that to happen.
Yes.
I'm going to use that Walter Cronkite quote that you included in your presentation. And maybe, I think there was one other one that I jotted down. So you gave me a good idea there, to bring in some other outside sources. So,
well, there's also, and we thought about it, and I should have made it accessible to myself, but there was an article in the Washington Post recently about libraries and their function in democracy. And the last paragraph is something you ought to use, Kara.
Okay.
I bet Barb's got it handy.
Yeah, it's on the last slide of the PowerPoint, and it says we need to preserve our libraries and the books they hold, partly to figure out who we are and where we came from, but perhaps more pressingly, we need to preserve them both as a refuge from the culture wars and a template to rebuild a cultural life together when this war is over. Without them, we may have no way to teach our children to share ideas instead of battling each other forever. And that is on the very last, it's on the very last, it was an opinion piece in Washington Post just yesterday.
Okay, great.
It's on the very last slide, and you will get a PDF of this presentation along with a Word document that has all the graphics in it.
Okay, wonderful. Everybody's excited.
Because of course I forgot to go to the last slide. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I think I maybe jumped in. I'm sorry. I just didn't want us to run out of time. Lori, how do your members handle remaining nonpartisan and still expressing personal choice for candidates? That's a good question.
Well, your personal choice is yours when you go to the ballot box. I mean, you make sure that the information is out there so people can make their own decisions. Libraries do that all the time, you know? And send people to vote 411, make sure they know, you know, tell them to get involved in their own communities, ask candidates, ask the parties in the communities, can you make sure that we've got, we have access for all voters to hear from the candidates? Can you help persuade your candidates to participate in forums? That means actually calling them to participate as members of the community.
But one of the things at the league that we do, and we talk about it all the time within the league, is when we're representing the league and wearing league spirit wear, we don't talk about parties or candidates. We take
Right.
no position officially as the league on parties or candidates. We do on positions, policy positions, and that's where the league stands on things. So we have stood for a number of years on certain positions for things, 50 years on some, more than that on other issues, like a
Right.
long time we've stood on that position, and we get painted by a certain light by one party or another, and we're like, we haven't moved in decades, like don't paint us into a corner. And so we really do talk about it at the league and take it very, very seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think
That was
I'll
your part.
wrap it up. I know we could stay and talk for a long time. I appreciate you sharing that slide. That gives me a name and something to look for. So, and
Yes.
ammunition, ammunition for my email later. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you, Linda, Barbara, Kate, and I think
Cindy.
Cindy
Cindy left.
left.
Yeah.
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 Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.